My boyfriend calmly asked me to help raise his ex-girlfriend's children, using my money. He never expected what I did next. My name is Claire Morrison. I was 41 years old when the man I thought I would grow old with sat across from me at dinner and calmly explained that his ex-girlfriend wanted children now. And somehow in his mind, that became my responsibility. Before that night, I thought I had a solid relationship with Daniel. We'd spent 15 years together, 12 of them living as though we were already married, and from the beginning, we'd agreed on one thing. We weren't going to have children. Not a vague maybe, not a someday, a clear adult decision. Daniel had even gotten a vasectomy 5 years into our relationship because we were both that certain. I drove him to the clinic. I waited in that cold little room with bad coffee and outdated magazines. I helped him into the car afterward. I brought him soup, changed the ice packs, and sat beside him while he joked that we had officially bought ourselves a quiet future. And I believed him. We built a comfortable life together. A nice house, 2 vacations a year, early retirement plans, Saturday mornings with coffee on the back porch, a shared calendar full of ordinary things that felt safe because they were ours. Then, 3 weeks ago, on a Wednesday evening, Daniel destroyed all of it between 2 bites of pasta. He looked down at his plate and said, "Natalie reached out." I remember the sound of my fork touching the rim of the bowl. Natalie, his ex-girlfriend from before me, the woman he once called the love of his life before she left him for a wealthier man 16 years ago. I kept my voice calm. "Okay, and you're telling me this because—" Daniel didn't look guilty. That was the first warning sign. "She wants kids now." I stared at him. "What?" "She said she made a mistake. She said she should have chosen me. We've been talking for months." For a second, the kitchen seemed to shrink around me. The warm lights over the island, the wine glasses, the framed photo from our trip to Greece. All of it suddenly felt staged, like I had been living inside a house someone else had already planned to abandon. "You've been talking to your ex for months?" "Just catching up," he said quickly. "Nothing physical." As if that made it better. I put my fork down. "So you want to leave me for Natalie?" And that was when the conversation turned insane. Daniel leaned forward like he had been waiting for me to ask. "No, I don't want to leave you." I laughed once because my brain could not find another response. "Then what exactly are you saying?" He took a breath. "Natalie can't afford to have kids on her own. She's between jobs, and she doesn't have the kind of stability we do. But we can afford it. You make good money. The house is almost paid off. We could raise them together." For a moment, I honestly waited for the punchline. It never came. "You want me," I said slowly, "to raise children with your ex-girlfriend?" "She'd be involved," he said, like he was explaining something reasonable. "Just not financially at first. She'd be more like a close family friend." "A close family friend who is also their biological mother. You're making it sound weird." "It is weird." His face tightened. Then he started talking about modern families, about how love did not have to look traditional, about how I was being closed-minded, about how Natalie was artistic and sensitive and would bring different values to the children's lives. I watched his mouth move and realized this wasn't an impulse. He had been planning this for a long time, without ever asking what I wanted. "Daniel," I said, "we agreed on no kids. You got surgery because we agreed on no kids. People change." "You're allowed to change your mind," I said. "You are not allowed to bring your ex's children into my house and expect me to pay for them." He blinked, almost offended. "Our house, our money, we're a team." And that was when I knew. He genuinely expected me to bankroll his second chance with Natalie. So I leaned back, folded my napkin, and said the sentence he would later try to use against me. "Follow your heart, Daniel." His face softened. He actually smiled. "Really? You'll consider it?" "No," I said. "I'm saying do what you want, but understand that I won't be part of it." The smile vanished. Thursday morning, before I even left for work, Daniel was at his laptop researching vasectomy reversal clinics. That day I made 2 calls, one to my lawyer, one to my financial advisor, because Daniel thought he had opened a door to a beautiful new family. He had no idea he had just opened the exit. The next week moved with terrifying speed. I kept waiting for Daniel to wake up one morning and realize how absurd his plan sounded. Instead, he became even more committed to it. By Monday morning, he slid a credit card authorization form across the breakfast table. "The clinic needs payment before the procedure," he said casually. "Just sign here." I looked at the form. Private fertility clinic. Expedited vasectomy reversal. Estimated cost, just over $8,000. "You expect me to pay for this?" "It's our money." "Our money," I repeated slowly. "For you to father another woman's children?" He sighed dramatically. "You're twisting everything." "No, I'm simplifying it." His patience vanished. "You're being selfish. And you're asking me to finance the end of our relationship. We're still together. You're planning a family with someone else. You're making it sound like cheating. What exactly would you call it?" His jaw tightened. "You're emotionally manipulating me because you're scared." I almost laughed. Instead, I pushed the paperwork back across the table. "I won't sign." For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he exploded. "You've always controlled the money." "I've always managed the finances because we agreed I was better at it." "You're punishing me because I finally know what I want." "No," I replied quietly. "I'm refusing to sponsor it." He stormed upstairs hard enough to shake the pictures hanging along the hallway. An hour later, my phone rang. His older sister, Melissa. She didn't bother saying hello. Why are you refusing Daniel's medical treatment? Medical treatment? He said you're withholding money for his surgery. I closed my office door before answering. He wants surgery so he can have children with Natalie. Well, he's still your boyfriend. Yes. You're supposed to support each other. I support him finding happiness. So help him. I am. I'm telling him to follow his heart. You're being petty. No, I answered. I'm being realistic. She hung up without another word. Daniel eventually withdrew money from his retirement account, nearly $10,000 after penalties. When he came home that evening, he slammed the paperwork onto the kitchen counter. There, he snapped. Happy? I glanced at the receipt. No. That answer seemed to confuse him. I didn't want you to lose retirement savings, I said calmly. I wanted you to realize what you were sacrificing. He walked away without another word. That afternoon, I met with my attorney. Her name was Rebecca Sloan. She had handled one of my coworkers' divorces the previous year and came highly recommended. Rebecca listened quietly while I explained everything. She never interrupted. When I finally finished, she folded her hands together. Do you have evidence? He texts more than he talks. Good. He doesn't hide any of this. Even better. What should I do? Stop arguing verbally. She opened a legal pad. From now on, confirm everything through text messages. Everything? Everything. She smiled faintly. People become surprisingly honest when they think they're documenting their own victory. That evening, I followed her advice. I waited until Daniel settled onto the couch. Instead of talking, I texted him. Just confirming. You've scheduled surgery so you can have children with Natalie? His reply arrived almost immediately. Yes. Another message followed. You promised you'd support me. I typed carefully. I said you should follow your heart. I never agreed to raise another woman's children. He responded almost instantly. You're my partner. Of course we'll raise them together. We're a family. I stared at the screen before asking one more question. What will Natalie contribute financially? His answer came after a full minute. She'll be their biological mother and emotional support. She's rebuilding her life. You know that. Don't be cruel. I took screenshots. Every message. Every timestamp. Every admission. The next afternoon, Rebecca reviewed them. She nodded once. These are excellent. They're that important? They show expectation. Expectation? She openly believes you'll finance children conceived with another partner. Rebecca leaned back. Judges care about documented intent. That was when my breathing finally slowed. Not because I thought I had already won. Because I realized I wasn't imagining any of this. It really was as insane as it sounded. Friday morning arrived. Daniel packed a small overnight bag. He seemed genuinely excited. That was the strangest part. He wasn't conflicted. He wasn't guilty. He hummed while folding clothes. Natalie was picking him up. She wants to be there when I wake up, he said with a smile. How thoughtful. Don't start. I wasn't. This is a beautiful thing, Claire. I looked into his eyes. He actually believed that. She says we'll finally become the family we were always meant to be. I swallowed hard. And where exactly do I fit into that family? He smiled gently. You'll understand once the kids are here. He truly believed I would eventually love the children. That I would simply adapt. That 15 years together guaranteed my compliance. He kissed my forehead before leaving. I love you. I didn't answer. Instead, I watched him walk out the front door carrying an overnight bag for surgery that would allow him to build a future with another woman. At exactly 8:57 that morning, my phone notified me that he had checked into the clinic. I waited 3 more minutes. Then I opened the folder Rebecca had prepared. It contained every document I would need. My hand hovered over the first page. I signed. The ink hadn't even dried on my signature before Rebecca took the folder from my hands. I'll file everything immediately, she said. No delays. There won't be. At exactly 9 o'clock, Daniel was being prepared for surgery. At exactly 9:30, Rebecca filed my petition for divorce. The timing wasn't revenge. It was protection. If Daniel was willing to spend thousands of dollars preparing to build a family with another woman while expecting me to finance it, I couldn't afford another day of hesitation. Once the paperwork was filed, we moved to the next step. Rebecca had already coordinated everything with my financial advisor. A temporary legal hold was placed on our joint accounts. My salary was redirected to my personal account. Every shared credit card under my name was suspended. Finally, I updated my life insurance beneficiary. 15 years had taught me something important. Love could disappear overnight. Paperwork lasted much longer. By 11:30, my phone rang. Unknown number, I answered. This is Claire. A sharp female voice replied immediately. Ms. Morrison, my name is Janet Whitmore. I represent Daniel Morrison. That was fast. What can I do for you? What exactly have you done? I'll need you to be more specific. My client is recovering from surgery while discovering you filed for divorce and frozen marital accounts. My decision didn't begin today. You chose today. I chose the day he decided to have children with another woman. Her tone sharpened. He's still in recovery, and I'm still ending the relationship. You've left him without financial access. He withdrew nearly $10,000 from his retirement account last week. That money was for medical expenses. No, I spoke slowly. It was for surgery so he could father another woman's children. The line went quiet. Then she changed directions. You agreed to support him. I have text messages saying otherwise. I'd appreciate copies. You'll receive them during discovery. We'll be in touch. I'm sure we will. The line went dead. I set my phone down and stared out the office window. Rain had started falling, soft and steady, almost peaceful. It amazed me how ordinary the world looked while my entire life was splitting in half. Daniel came home the following afternoon. Natalie drove him. I watched through the living room window as her aging sedan pulled into the driveway. She hurried around to help him out. He moved carefully, one hand against his side. For just a second, I almost felt sorry for him. The reason for his surgery came rushing back. Natalie hugged him before leaving. She smiled toward the house like she already belonged there. Then she drove away. Daniel unlocked the front door. Claire? His voice sounded tired. I'm in the kitchen. He walked in slowly. Still sore. Still medicated. Then he saw the large envelope lying neatly beside his coffee mug. He frowned. What's this? Open it. He sat down. Pulled out the papers. Read the first page. His entire face drained of color. No. He flipped another page. Then another. No. Finally, he looked up. You filed for divorce? Yes. I just had surgery. I know. You said to follow my heart. And you did. My voice never rose. Now I'm following mine. He stared at me as though I had become someone else. You planned this. I made my decision the day you asked me to raise another woman's children. His breathing became uneven. You can't do this. I already did. He grabbed his wallet and pulled out one of our shared credit cards. I'll order dinner. 5 minutes later, he looked at the screen. Card declined. His forehead wrinkled. He tried another. Declined. What happened? The joint accounts are under temporary legal protection. He stood too quickly. Pain shot across his face. You froze everything? I protected my assets. This is financial abuse. No, this is divorce. He stormed toward the front door. 20 minutes later, he returned carrying grocery bags. Cash. He'd used cash from his retirement withdrawal. He slammed the bags onto the counter. You've humiliated me. No, you humiliated yourself. His eyes filled with anger. You'll regret this. I don't think I will. The next morning, the phone started ringing. First Melissa, then his mother, then 2 mutual friends. By noon, even Natalie called. I didn't answer. Daniel finally confronted me that evening. You've turned everyone against me. I haven't spoken to anyone. They think I'm some kind of villain. You told them your version. And yours? I don't need one. He stared. What does that mean? The truth doesn't require rehearsal. That answer seemed to frustrate him more than any argument could have. Sunday morning arrived. At 9 o'clock, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, Daniel's entire support system stood on my porch. Melissa, his mother. Natalie, even Natalie's younger sister. 4 people. 4 disapproving faces. Melissa spoke first. Can we come in? I suppose. They gathered in the living room. No one touched the coffee I'd offered. His mother finally broke the silence. Claire, relationships require compromise. I looked directly at her. Compromise? Daniel simply wants a family. With Natalie. His mother hesitated. People make mistakes. Then Daniel should build that future with her. Natalie finally spoke. I never wanted to hurt you. I smiled sadly. And yet, here we are. She lowered her eyes. I love him. I believe you. I didn't ask him to leave you. No. My attention shifted toward the hallway. He did that himself. Daniel finally stepped into the room. Can't we find another solution? There isn't one. We've spent 15 years together. And you traded them for a second chance with your past. His voice cracked. You really won't reconsider? My eyes swept across the room. At the people who believed I should finance the life they had imagined without my permission. Then I answered quietly. No. Because in that moment, I finally understood something. They weren't asking me to save a relationship. They were asking me to disappear inside someone else's dream. And I was done disappearing. By Monday morning, Daniel stopped pretending this was just a misunderstanding. Now it was a war. I woke up to dozens of notifications. He had posted a long message on social media. Some people can't handle it when the person they love chooses a different future. Financial control is emotional abuse. My body, my choice. He never mentioned Natalie, the children, or the fact that he expected me to help raise them. At first, the comments leaned in his favor. People who didn't know the full story called me cold, controlling, heartless. Then someone asked a simple question. Different future with who? Another person replied, Isn't this about his ex-girlfriend? Within an hour, the comment section became a battlefield. One mutual friend wrote, Wait, he expects Claire to help raise his ex's kids? Another asked, Surely that's not real. Daniel deleted the post before lunchtime. The internet had done what I no longer cared to do. It had asked the obvious question. 2 weeks after his surgery, Janet officially entered the case. The first proposal arrived by email. Rebecca forwarded it without commentary. I opened the attachment. 5 years of financial support, half of my retirement, a larger share of our marital savings, payment for Daniel's surgery, and one sentence that made me read it twice. Future support for the children once they are born. I blinked, then laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. Rebecca called a few minutes later. I assume you've read it. I have. What do you think? I think they've confused confidence with reality. Rebecca chuckled. I had the same thought. They're seriously asking me to contribute to children that don't even exist? They're asking. And your answer? We reject every extraordinary demand. I smiled. Perfect. Mediation was scheduled for Thursday afternoon. Rebecca met me outside the conference room. You ready? As ready as anyone can be. When we walked inside, I immediately noticed Daniel wasn't alone. Natalie sat beside him. She smiled politely, as though this were perfectly normal. Rebecca placed her briefcase on the table. I'm sorry, she said. Who exactly is attending mediation? Janet answered first. Natalie is here as emotional support. Rebecca looked at the mediator. Unless she's a party to this relationship, I question her relevance. The mediator glanced toward Daniel. Ms. Carter may remain as an observer, but she won't participate. Natalie nodded. Daniel squeezed her hand. He didn't even seem embarrassed. That tiny gesture hurt more than I expected. Not because I wanted him back. Because 15 years had apparently become replaceable in a matter of weeks. The meeting began. Janet spoke first. My client simply wishes to move forward peacefully. Rebecca folded her hands. So does mine. Janet continued. Daniel sacrificed years believing parenthood wasn't possible. Rebecca interrupted gently. Parenthood wasn't impossible. It was a mutual choice. Janet ignored the correction. He has every right to change his mind. Rebecca nodded. Absolutely. No one disputes that. Janet smiled. So we're making progress. Rebecca's smile disappeared. He also has every right to pursue that future with Natalie. The room went still. Rebecca continued. What he doesn't have is the right to expect Claire to finance that future. The mediator wrote something down. Janet shifted in her chair. Daniel finally spoke. I never wanted to hurt Claire. I looked at him. Really? I thought eventually you'd understand. Understand what? That love grows. It certainly does. I held his gaze. Apparently it grew in someone else's direction. He broke eye contact. The mediator asked a simple question. One that changed the atmosphere completely. Mr. Morrison? Daniel looked up. If these children are biologically yours and Ms. Carter's... He paused. Why would Ms. Morrison be financially responsible? Daniel hesitated. We've always shared everything. Even after separation? No. Then explain your expectation. Daniel searched for words. Finally, he answered. We're family. I couldn't help it. I laughed. Not loudly. Not cruelly. Just once. Because hearing it aloud made it sound even more impossible. Rebecca slid several printed pages across the table. Our client anticipated this discussion. The mediator quietly read through every message Daniel had written before setting the pages back on the table. When he finished reading, he slowly removed his glasses. I see. That was all he said. But the tone had changed. We broke for lunch. As I walked toward the parking garage, someone called my name. Claire. I turned. Natalie stood several feet away, alone. I'd like to say something. I waited. I'm sorry. For what? I never meant for this to happen. You stayed. Her shoulders dropped. I love him. I know. He told me you would eventually understand. He said you had always been practical. He told me you'd eventually see this as the best solution for everyone. I believed him. He made it sound as though the two of you had already talked about it. Her voice cracked. I never imagined he hadn't actually asked you. I smiled sadly. He underestimated both of us. What do you mean? You underestimated what he was asking. She frowned. He said we'd all become one family. I shook my head. He asked me to erase myself. Natalie's expression slowly changed. Not defensive. Confused. Almost uncertain. That was when I wondered if Daniel had been telling each of us different versions of the same fantasy. The second half of mediation ended without an agreement. Rebecca filed for an expedited divorce immediately afterward. As we walked back to the parking lot, she stopped beside my car. There's something you should prepare for. What? When people lose control of the legal argument, she closed her briefcase. They often create emotional ones. I looked at her. What does that mean? It means this probably isn't the last surprise. Driving home, those words stayed with me. Rebecca wasn't trying to frighten me. She was warning me. Because Daniel still believed he deserved the life he'd imagined. And desperate people rarely stop after hearing the word no. I had the unsettling feeling that the most difficult part of the story hadn't happened yet. Rebecca's warning proved accurate much sooner than either of us expected. 3 days after mediation, I drove home from work and immediately knew something was wrong. The front gate was locked, which wasn't unusual. What stopped me was realizing my house key no longer worked. I tried again. Nothing. Then I heard footsteps inside. The front door opened just enough for Daniel to appear. He wasn't alone. Natalie stood several feet behind him, carrying a cardboard box. Daniel folded his arms. You can't just come in whenever you want. I stared at him. What did you just say? We changed the locks. For several seconds, I genuinely thought I had misheard him. You changed the locks. He nodded. We live here now. My name is on the deed. You abandoned the house. I moved out temporarily to avoid conflict. Natalie quietly looked toward the floor. She suddenly seemed much less comfortable than she had during mediation. Daniel! It's okay, he interrupted. No, it isn't, I replied. This house was mine before we ever met. You left. I left because you brought another woman into my relationship. He sighed dramatically. You're making this harder than it has to be. I looked past him. My grandmother's antique mirror was gone from the hallway. Boxes were stacked in the living room. The furniture had been rearranged. 15 years of memories were being packed away, as if I had never existed. I felt something inside me become strangely calm. Not numb. Certain. I stepped back. I'll let the court handle this. Daniel shrugged. Do whatever you want. Then he closed the door. The police arrived 20 minutes later. The responding officer listened patiently while I explained everything. He examined the property records I had printed from my phone. He nodded, then sighed. Unfortunately, this is considered a civil dispute. So they can keep me out of my own house? They currently reside here. The house belongs to me. I understand. His expression suggested he genuinely did. But ownership and occupancy aren't always resolved roadside. Daniel opened the door again. He smiled, not warmly, triumphantly. You heard the officer. I met his gaze. This isn't over, he laughed. I think it is. It wasn't. The next morning, Rebecca filed an emergency motion requesting exclusive possession of the residence. The deed is straightforward, she said. They've made a mistake. Will the judge see it that way? I believe so. She paused. But expect retaliation. I had barely returned home when another surprise arrived. Someone knocked on my apartment door. A process server. He handed me an envelope. Inside was a petition requesting a protective order. Against me. I read it twice. According to Daniel, I had harassed him, threatened Natalie, used financial pressure to manipulate him, attempted to prevent him from starting a family. I looked up at Rebecca after forwarding her photographs of every page. She called within minutes. This is exactly what I warned you about. So he actually believes this? Whether he believes it is almost irrelevant. Then why file it? Because creating paperwork creates narratives. She paused. But facts still matter. The hearing took place Wednesday morning. The courtroom was surprisingly quiet. I expected tension. Instead, I felt clarity. Daniel arrived wearing an expensive navy suit. Natalie accompanied him. When they walked together, they almost looked like a couple beginning a hopeful new chapter. If someone had seen them without context, they never would have guessed whose relationship had been destroyed to create that picture. The hearing began. Janet argued first. My client fears continued intimidation. Rebecca stood calmly. Your Honor, we'd like to begin with property ownership. She handed the judge the deed. Purchased solely by me years before Daniel and I ever met. Next came the bank records. Then the text messages. Then photographs documenting Daniel's plans with Natalie. Finally, Rebecca produced the messages where Daniel repeatedly described me helping raise children conceived with another woman. The courtroom became noticeably quieter. The judge adjusted his glasses. He turned toward Daniel. Mr. Morrison. Yes, Your Honor? Is it true you intended to have children with Ms. Carter? Yes. And expected Ms. Morrison to help raise them? Daniel hesitated. Eventually, yes. The judge leaned back in his chair. Help me understand something, Mr. Morrison. Daniel shifted uneasily. You voluntarily underwent a vasectomy years ago because both of you agreed not to have children. Yes. You later chose to reverse that procedure. Yes. So this was your decision. Yes. And yet you expected Ms. Morrison to finance that decision while another woman became the children's mother? Daniel hesitated. When you say it like that, I'm saying it exactly the way you've described it. The judge shifted his attention from Janet back to Daniel, and despite that expectation, he paused. You believe Ms. Morrison is the party acting unreasonably? Daniel swallowed. I just wanted everyone to stay together. I finally spoke. Your Honor. The judge nodded. You may answer. I loved Daniel for 15 years. My voice remained steady. I supported every decision we made together. I glanced briefly toward Daniel, but I never agreed to finance another relationship. The judge nodded once, then delivered his decision. The request for a protective order is denied. I heard Daniel inhale sharply. The judge continued. Exclusive possession of the residence is granted to Ms. Morrison. My heart pounded. Daniel stared in disbelief. You have 48 hours to vacate the property. He stood so abruptly that his chair scraped loudly across the courtroom floor. This isn't fair! The judge's voice remained perfectly calm. You are free to pursue any relationship you choose. Another pause. But not in someone else's home. Daniel looked at Natalie. Natalie looked away. For the first time since all of this had begun, neither of them spoke. Friday morning arrived. Moving day. Rebecca advised me to hire off-duty police officers to supervise. It removes unnecessary drama, she explained. She underestimated just how much drama Daniel intended to create. A moving truck pulled into the driveway shortly after 8. Daniel climbed out. Natalie followed. Then his sister Melissa. Then his mother. Apparently they had brought an audience. Boxes began filling the driveway. Most contained Daniel's belongings. Some contained gifts we had bought together. Then Daniel reached for the 75-inch television mounted in the living room. I stepped forward. That stays. We bought it together. I paid for it. I used it. I almost smiled. So did I. Rebecca quietly handed one of the officers a folder containing receipts. The officer reviewed them, then turned toward Daniel. Sir? He pointed toward the wall. Leave the television. Daniel reluctantly stepped back. His mother shook her head dramatically. This is unbelievable. No, I answered. What was unbelievable was expecting me to build your son's future with another woman. Nobody had a response. Not this time. Because documents have a way of ending arguments that emotions never can. By early afternoon, the truck was only half full. Most of what Daniel wanted to take had never belonged to him. As the last box disappeared into the truck, he stopped beside the front door. He looked around the house one final time, then at me. You'll regret this when you're alone. I met his eyes without hesitation. I'd rather be alone than invisible. He held my gaze for several seconds, then turned away. The truck pulled out of the driveway. The silence that followed was unlike anything I had experienced in years. It wasn't empty. It was peaceful. For the first time since that dinner conversation, the house finally felt like mine again. I thought the hardest part was over. I was wrong. The divorce itself became easier. Living with what 15 years had turned into, that was harder. 3 days after Daniel moved out, my phone rang. Melissa. For the first time since all of this began, she didn't sound angry. She sounded exhausted. Claire, I waited. They're staying at my house. I'm not surprised. Natalie keeps talking about baby names. I closed my eyes. They're not even pregnant. I know, she said quietly, after admitting Daniel still didn't have steady work. When she finally mentioned that they argued every day, I didn't know what to say. I honestly don't know what he was thinking anymore. Neither did I. Or perhaps I did. He had confused fantasy with reality. And now reality had finally arrived. I can't help them, I said quietly. I know. She hesitated. I think I called because I needed someone else to say this is crazy. It is. She laughed weakly. You're right. That was the last time she defended him. Over the following weeks, Rebecca handled almost everything. Janet's demands became noticeably smaller. The request for long-term financial support disappeared. The demand that I reimburse Daniel's surgery quietly vanished. Eventually, the negotiations became what they should have been from the beginning. A standard division of shared marital assets. Nothing more, nothing less. The house remained mine because I had purchased it years before our relationship, although I compensated Daniel for the increase in equity accumulated during our years together. It wasn't cheap, but every dollar bought peace, and peace was worth more than revenge. Then one Friday afternoon, security from my office called upstairs. Claire? Yes? There's someone here asking to see you. My stomach tightened. When I stepped into the lobby, Daniel stood near the reception desk. He looked nothing like the confident man who had walked out of our house 6 weeks earlier. His wrinkled shirt, uneven beard, and dark circles told the story before he spoke. We need to talk. No, please. I glanced toward the receptionist who was pretending not to listen. You shouldn't be here. I didn't know where else to go. I folded my arms. What happened? He hesitated, then quietly said, Natalie left. The words hung in the air. I remained silent as he admitted Natalie had walked away. She moved out yesterday. I'm sorry it ended that way. He searched my face. So you really don't care anymore? I don't celebrate other people's pain. His shoulders dropped. I made more than one mistake. I know. I thought she'd make me happy. You thought she would give you a second chance. He nodded. I thought we could build something. And instead, I lost everything. In that moment, I believed he understood. Not because he had become wiser. Because consequences had finally taught the lesson words never could. He took one cautious step closer. I still love you. Those words would have destroyed me 2 months earlier. Now they felt strangely distant. No, I answered softly. I think you missed the life we built. His eyes filled with tears. We had 15 good years. We did. Can we try again? I looked at the man standing in front of me. The man I had once trusted with every dream I had. Then I remembered another image. Daniel smiling across our dinner table while calmly explaining how I would help raise children with his ex-girlfriend. Some memories outweigh all the others. I can't. Why? Because every time I'd look at you, I paused. I'd remember the moment you expected me to disappear, so your new life could exist. He lowered his head. I was selfish. Yes. I thought you'd always forgive me. I know. Finally, he whispered. I'm sorry. This time I believed him. The apology was real. It had simply arrived far too late. He nodded once, turned around, walked toward the exit. He never looked back. Neither did I. 2 months later, the divorce was finalized. Rebecca smiled as she handed me the last signed document. Congratulations. It feels strange hearing that after a divorce. She smiled. I'm not congratulating you for ending a relationship. She closed the file. I'm congratulating you for protecting yourself. As I walked out of the courthouse, I stopped on the front steps. The air felt lighter, not because life had become perfect, because it had become honest. A few weeks later, Melissa sent me one final message. Thought you should know. Natalie left town. She finally accepted a job offer she'd been pursuing for months in another state. Daniel's living alone now. I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. I hope they both find what they're looking for, she answered almost immediately. I think you already found what you were looking for. At first, I didn't understand. Then I looked around my quiet living room that evening. Fresh flowers sat on the table while quiet music filled the room. A book waited beside my favorite chair. For the first time in years, the silence felt peaceful instead of lonely. And suddenly, I realized she was right. Only then did I realize the most valuable thing I had recovered wasn't my house or my savings. It was the woman I had almost forgotten how to be. People sometimes ask whether I regret leaving. I never do. The night I told Daniel to follow his heart, I unknowingly chose to follow my own. Walking away from him wasn't losing my future. It was finally getting it back.